Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, it seems like the curve continues to flatten, but there are still restrictions on public events. Those remain high, including the loss of Jazz Fest, Voodoo Fest, and Essence Fest for this year. We'll take a look at the latest, and we'll also look into what's happening with sports, the oil and gas industry, and also state versus federal. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Kathy Finn, the freelance business reporter and columnist for New Orleans Magazine, Gordon Russell, who's the managing editor for investigations with the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans Advocate, and Jeff Duncan, sports writer for The Athletic website. We go to Gordon first, and just sort of for a status update, where are we now? We sort of see that curve kind of flattening out, but there's still a high number of hospital admissions, fatalities. So how's it looking?
I mean, I think the signs are all encouraging, but you have to take that with a grain of salt. There are still a lot of people sick and a lot of people dying, but the signs are that we've peaked, and that the worst outcome that was feared, which was sort of a crush of people that was too much for hospitals to take, does not appear to have materialized. I mean, it has not materialized, and hopefully never will. That was the fear a couple of weeks ago, is that we were going to run out of ventilators and emergency room or intensive care beds. So that's a good thing. It doesn't mean we're out of the woods by any means, but it does appear to have. It's a little tricky because the data, as we've talked about before, kind of goes up and down on a daily basis. But if you look at it sort of flattened out over time, it's been the number of new cases, the number of deaths, all those things have been kind of going down over time. And especially, I think, in Orleans and Jefferson Parish, which are the epicenter within the state, I think there's still some, the virus is still spreading around the rest of the state. The rest of the state's a little bit behind the metro area in terms of the spread of the COVID-19, but and that's true with the country as well. But I guess overall, I think we may have hit the peak, and the question is kind of what happens from now on. And there's always the danger of another peak if things get too relaxed. I think that it's clear that the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders have really made a difference.
Had an impact. We did see a jump in Jefferson Parish. Jefferson Parish sort of closing in on Orleans Parish in terms of numbers.
It really is. There's been a little over 300 deaths in Orleans Parish to date, and there's been, I think, 261 in Jefferson Parish, and it's been getting closer and closer. And I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, the same is true with the number of infections there. The coroner told us recently that they've given the coroners new guidance, the CDC has, where they can classify a death as a coronavirus death, even if there's not a positive test, if they believe that there are other signs that indicate coronavirus. And the Jefferson Parish coroner has told us that he's started doing that. But the state has told us that they're not actually counting them that way, and that every death that's announced by the state, which is where we mostly get our data from, that those are all cases in which coronavirus is confirmed. So I don't know what's driving it exactly. I mean, Jefferson Parish was a tiny bit behind New Orleans, I think, at the beginning in terms of where it was on the curve, and it is a larger parish, more people, and it seems to, so the peak may have occurred several days later there, and it may end up having as many or more fatalities than Orleans Parish.
Something, of course, that's on everybody's mind is how much longer for the stay-at-home order. The mayor of New Orleans, Mayor Cantrells, said to May 16th. We heard from the governor this week his feelings about how we begin phasing back to whatever our normal is going to be. What is it looking like for this area, for the state also?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to say. Everybody, of course, is eager to get back to normal life, but everyone's at the same time terrified of moving too quickly, I think, and losing control of this thing again. So, as you said, Mayor Cantrell has already extended the New Orleans stay-at-home order by another month to May 16th, and I'd be surprised if the state doesn't do the same, although they haven't done it yet. So I don't know what we're going to see and how, when we're going to see it and what exactly it's going to look like when they start bringing folks back, when they start letting people do more. I think, it's just going to be, nobody wants to blow this, but at the same time, there's real concerns about the economy, of course, and just kind of this.
Yeah, Gordon, I think a couple of things that might be changing, in addition to people getting kind of tired and a little frustrated with it, is with the meeting they had with the president yesterday. The president pretty much told the governors, "Here's our guidelines, but do what you want." And so it seems that it's possible in a couple of weeks you're going to have different states doing different things. And now I think everybody's pretty much doing the same thing. But once that happens, once people start hearing that their neighboring state is being more lenient, I think that's the build up pressure to free the people.
Right, and of course, you've had that all along with different states doing different things from the beginning. We were one of the earlier states to crack down. States like Mississippi and Arkansas didn't do that as quickly. Texas as well. So I think another thing that's interesting is there's models showing when this is going to peak in different places, and Louisiana is kind of an early peaking state according to the models, which could create a different set of problems if we peak early and then decide to open up. But then do we have to try to keep people from neighboring states out where the disease might still be kind of on the march, as they've done to us in the early stages of this?
It just sounds so strange to keep people from neighboring states out, or for
Yeah.
us even to go to someplace else. Let's talk about, speaking about tourists and people who would come visit us, they'd come for Jazz Fest, they'd come for Essence, come for Voodoo Fest. And French Quarter Festival, we still really don't know about, but the first three, they're not going to hold their festivals this year.
Right.
So what kind of impact is that to this area?
I mean, I think it's a huge impact, obviously, at Jazz Fest being the biggest, of course. And, it's for local musicians, not just, local musicians in particular. It's really a big part of their living is that those couple of weeks and all the gigs they get around that. And obviously for all the vendors there and all the craftspeople, it's kind of it's like their Christmas season.
Right.
So it's a huge, huge impact. I think it was probably inevitable. Like, I think large gatherings like this are probably the last thing that's going to come back. And then, there's all kinds of other factors with these too. You can't, they were trying to cram all these festivals into one season kind of, which was probably going to make the festivals an economic disaster as well. I don't think that's the reason that they canceled them, but, and, certainly the kind of demographic that attends Jazz Fest tends to be, older people on balance. And it's really the idea of getting 200,000 people in that age group together is probably really, really dangerous. So it seems, they canceled Voodoo Fest as well. So I don't think
Right.
that's the reason either.
And
And I feel like, right.
is not coming either. And of course, one thing the mayor said, the city is losing money, and it would be really hard to try to provide all the services that would be needed for these festivals, much less just for everyday life. So it's just hard all the way around with the losses that families are suffering, and then of course businesses, et cetera. So, and if I just could have a note here of WYES personal note, one of the losses that we learned about just this week, just yesterday morning actually, was our coworker, our colleague, our member of our WYES family, James Mathur Sr., who was our custodian. He was the person who made sure everything was in order at WYES, and he kept it in order, and in the sweetest, kindest way, just such a kind, gentle soul for all of the staff, guests who would come in, that big smile, warm spirit. He just made you feel welcome. And we lost him to COVID yesterday. And so our sincere condolences to his wife, Mary, his entire family. We are all heartbroken. And Mr. James, rest well. Thank you for everything you've done for us all. Just a sad, sorry loss. We're so sorry. Our condolences to his family. Okay, we're just going to move on now. Kathy, other losses in the oil and gas industry. How is it faring?
we haven't seen a 1-2 punch like this, well, perhaps ever. I tuned in to an online economics seminar a couple of days ago in which economist Lauren Scott made some forecasts and talked about the situation and the impact on the state at large and on New Orleans. And as I said, we just haven't seen anything like this before. Between the combination of the oil and gas industry and tourism happening all at once is just something we haven't dealt with before. In the oil industry, even before Corona, long before Corona, the industry was not doing particularly well, dating back to 2014, 2015, when there was a downturn in the industry brought on by geopolitical factors. And we saw oil prices decline in that period, and they never fully recovered. In places like Houma, Louisiana, and Lafayette, never have completely recovered from that point, and oil prices have not recovered that far. Well, then just very recently, of course, we saw the incipient price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia, which drove prices down further. And that was before we really were taking the coronavirus terribly seriously in this country. And so that brought prices further down. Well, then, once the city and the state shut down entirely, basically, prices dropped from around 40 some dollars a barrel, close to $50 a barrel, down to $20 a barrel. And that's just unheard of. Not only does that knock the socks off of Houma and Lafayette, but it has ripple effects throughout South Louisiana, certainly, and into North Louisiana. And if the industry, this is going to be very difficult for the industry to recover from in this state, along with the obvious job losses that will come with businesses closing down, more businesses closing down in the greater metropolitan area. What we're going to see is the impact on state government. And Scott forecasted between the oil and gas industry and tourism that there would be job losses close to above 300,000 across the state. And he talked about unemployment figures reaching 20% or even higher in the state. One of the problems here is that the revenues from the oil and gas industry to state government will be sharply cut. Between that and a drop in sales taxes that's coming from retail and all the other places that you would expect to get sales taxes, he predicts a $400 million shortfall for the state in this fiscal year, which ends June 30th. So he said the blow is not that serious. It's softened somewhat by the fact that the state was running a budget surplus. And so he's predicting that maybe that shortfall will look more like $200 million. But the problem is, while state government has not yet started layoffs or done anything terribly drastic in response to this situation, they likely will begin, by July 1st, when a new fiscal year begins, and they have to really budget for the whole year. There likely will be impacts, and we might see that in the public sector, both in Baton Rouge, certainly, but also in New Orleans. So there's a big impact coming down the road from all of this. And even if the city and the state begin to open up more, we're not going to see the oil and gas industry recover in a hurry at all. It's going to take a very long time. And I would say we're not going to see the industry look like it used to in Louisiana at all.
Just such a challenging time. Unbelievably challenging time.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that Scott, in his prediction of maybe 300 and some thousand jobs being lost, 2/3 of that will be in casinos, restaurants, and hotels. So there it is, the 1-2 punch from oil and gas and tourism. It's just like all at once, really, it's not something you recover from very quickly.
No, it isn't. Jeff, we're going to go to you. Thanks a lot, Kathy, because another area that people are really involved in, certainly engaged in, can be passionate about is sports, and it's not happening right now. What are we going to see happen? What do you think?
Well, Marcia, I think it depends on what sport you're talking about. I think every sport is going to be impacted differently. Certainly we love football in Louisiana, and that might be the sport that's impacted the least right now because it's the off season and their season was over when this outbreak happened in America. But I do think certainly we're going to see a different football season than we've ever seen. It's a very unprecedented situation, and all the major league commissioners have been meeting in concert, not only with President Trump, but also among themselves, trying to come up with a concerted plan of how they're going to address this going forward. There's so many unanswered questions right now that there's more really questions than answers for everyone involved. And I think it's a very fluid situation. I don't think anyone can really say with any certainty what's going to happen. Now, the PGA Tour announced yesterday that they're going to restart golf tournaments in June 11th. They're going to restart their tournament schedule, and it's going to be somewhat truncated a little bit, but they are coming back. So that will be the first major sport that we see in America competing again. And because of golf's inherent nature, it's outside. They're not going to obviously compete. The first 4 tournaments are not going to have fans, only essential personnel. I think that will be something of a test run for all the rest of the major sports to kind of see what works, what doesn't, the trial and error process. I think the key for every sport to come back as we know it is going to be testing. What kind of testing procedures are we going to have in this country at that point? Are we going to have improved large-scale testing, expedited testing, so the athletes themselves can all be tested before they compete? And I know that is right now a very unanswered question in our country, but every commissioner who speaks on these issues says that's going to be the key to getting our sports back. Now the NFL schedule has not even been released right now, so we don't even know what the Saints are going to play, when they would play. It's scheduled to be released before May 9th. The LSU and Tulane football schedules have already been set. But I have to tell you, there's a big difference in the economy and the economic factor between college football and pro football. Pro football can operate for the most part as a televised event, much like the draft. It's coming up next week, will be a televised event. It's really relying on advertising dollars and TV money, whereas college football is still very much reliant on ticket sales. LSU means an enormous amount to their athletic program to have an LSU football game in a home schedule, 100,000 fans for each one of those games. College football is such a cash cow that if it is not conducted with those fans in the seats, it's going to be very difficult for them to fund the rest of their athletic program. And we've already seen some major colleges already have to cut some spring sports out, Olympic sports. I think those sports, those non-revenue sports, really could bear the burden of this pandemic right now because because college football is what's going to help support them. And I'm not sure if anyone knows what it's going to be like in the fall, if we're going to have a phased-in fan participation or if we're going to have fans at all.
But Jeff, when they're talking about the possibility of having games without fans, or especially the NFL right now, are they talking about for the fall, or are they talking about for the entire season, or do they have any idea?
Errol, they don't have any idea. Roger Goodell, commissioner, said this week that they're basically preparing a number of different alternatives and preparing as if they're going to have a regular season schedule on time, but full well knowing that might not happen and that they have to have a plan for a truncated schedule, a delayed schedule start, fans in the stands, no fans in the stands. I mean, every option I think is being considered because football is the last major sport that's probably going to be impacted. The NBA is 80% of their schedule is done. They're trying to get their final 20% of their schedule finished and their postseason playoff schedule finished. Because these other sports are going to go before the NFL, I think it's going to give them something of a guinea pig, if you will, to see how those sports operate. And there's so many options on the table. The NBA, along with Major League Baseball, is talking about setting up these kind of bubble cities where they would play. For instance, the NBA might play all their games in Las Vegas and have all, because of the hotel capacity there, the teams would all be in one city and they would play games around the city in different arenas, playoff games. Major League Baseball is talking about doing that in Phoenix, out in Arizona, where spring training is held, and they can have the players in hotels, and they can play at the various spring training stadiums. But again, these things are all fluid right now, and I don't think anybody knows anything is hard and fast right now as an answer.
All right, Jeff. Well, thank you so much. We're going to have to move on to the next segment right now, which is you, actually. But thanks a lot, Jeff. And Errol, you wanted to talk about state versus federal. The governor's going to be calling the shots, or is it going to be White House?
Yeah, we call our government the federal government because it's a federation, meaning there are states and there's a central government. And it was the states that created the country and not the country that created the states. And so the states that it created was the original 13 colonies that created it. And so there's always a little bit more of a division between authority and the powers. Now, usually there's not too much question about it, or it's not tested too much, I guess, since the civil rights era. But boy, this past week you saw that you really see governors to the forefront, as you've seen in this last few weeks. And you saw this moment when the president has said, I need to open up the country. I've got the authority to do that. And the governors are saying, well, not so fast. You really don't have all the authority. And that's a question that's never really been challenged so much. And then you saw clusters of governors getting together, like the East Coast governors and the West Coast governors kind of standing together. And so finally, when they met with the president yesterday, the president says, here's what we think, but it's really your decision. And so you're just really seeing the disparity between at the federal level and at the state level. Of course, the big thing is that at the central government level, they have all the money, and that speaks loudly. But it's really been an interesting time in that you see 51 executives at play here, the 50 state governors and the president of the United States.
I know, it has been interesting. Yeah, Gordon?
I was just going to say, it reminded me a little bit of after Katrina, there was a similar fight for a couple of days about who was in control of the rescue and response and the National Guard and all that. And it, led to kind of a wave of finger pointing between the White House and our state government at the time.
Well, it looks like it's in the governor's hands for right now. That's what we're seeing, where governors are being told, do what you see fit. Kathy, let's go on over to you. Retail, shops are closed, they're taking a major hit too.
Yeah, it's brutal, really. And retail was not doing well before the coronavirus struck and closed everything down. And it's been a struggle. Most retailers have been struggling, frankly, for a few years. And of course, battling against the online business and the Amazons and others. This situation naturally is not going to do anything but aggravate that further, because people are at home, they're not able to go to stores that are closed and malls that are closed and so forth. So what are they doing? If they are buying, they're buying online. So this only further entrenches that trend of online buying, which won't help the bricks and mortar retailers out at all. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how much and how quickly retail in general comes back. And if you look at New Orleans and the metropolitan area in particular, Lakeside Mall, for instance, has been closed. At what point will they feel, even if the government says, okay, you can open, at what point will people feel comfortable going to places like that? And how quickly will that come back? Will it actually be able to rebound to the point where it was before? They're hurting, obviously, and one of the problems they're going to face, as with all other businesses that have been closed, is what about their employees? Many retailers likely have not been able to hold on to those employees, and when they go to open again, then what? Do they have to hire anew? Will they be able to bring people back? It's a very, very difficult market, a very difficult situation, and the consumer confidence level right now is in the tank. It's really low, and that is the thing more than anything else that affects retail markets. So we've got a long way to go, I think, before
way to go. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there really miss the chance just to go shop.
Yeah,
people enjoy shopping.
Right.
So, all right. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Jeff, we're going to wrap up with you. And Saints coach Sean Payton was sort of among the first who we heard was COVID positive, and he's recovered. He's doing good, which is a great thing.
Yes, and he said the other day that he's run into people out in public. He's living uptown right now, and he might as well have like a scarlet letter on his forehead, he said, because no one trusts right now his word that he has cleared the virus and is now safe to be around. He said that everyone is looking at him like he's basically a COVID leper, if you will. He cannot get across to people that he's one of the safest people you can be around. At least that's what his doctors are telling him. And look, I don't blame people because no one really knows. There's so many conflicting reports out there about this virus. But he is going to operate the draft this week from his home, along with Mickey Loomis. Each of the executives with the Saints will be in their own individual homes operating the draft, and they will have tech people there to assist them in their houses. It's going to be a very unique setup. But I think the ratings for that draft this week are going to be through the roof because I think fans and people in general are just looking forward to some type of sporting event, even if it is nothing more than a televised conference call.
Yeah, it's going to be different, but I mean, it's different across the board. Look at what we're doing, how we're delivering
Good
this,
point.
all of you guys in your own spots. So we're kind of getting used to doing that right now, but I must admit I will be very happy to be able to get back to the studio and see everybody in person. All right, let's wrap up this chat and getting your ideas about here we are now, mid-April really. What do you think it's going to be like come June 1st? What do you think we'll be able to do or still not be able to do? Start with you, Kathy.
Yeah, I remember when in the days
Yeah,
and
Errol jumped in, that's fine.
from Katrina.
Steve, go ahead.
Okay, I remember in the days and everything was coming back from Katrina, that what excited people the most was the word that a restaurant was reopening. You know, an accountant could open, a gas station could open, a library could open. No real excitement. A restaurant opening caused a lot of excitement. So in terms of just the public mood and then the public excitement, I hope by June 1st we're seeing a lot of restaurants opening.
Okay, Kathy, now you.
I would have said the same thing. I think you're going to see restaurants opening, not probably equipped to operate at full capacity. And I think people will be slow to come back to the restaurant, but they will come back. Like Errol said, people want to do that. I think also you're going to see different kinds of entertainment opening up because I think that's going to be an area where we see real innovation happening as far as how do people gather and hear music, for instance, and that sort of thing, live entertainment.
Okay, Gordon, you quick.
I mean, I agree with what everyone said, that restaurants, I think, are sort of a communal space where New Orleanians in particular love to go, and everybody's got favorite ones. I hope that we'll be able to go back to some of those by June 1st, but I do worry that it's going to change the economics of restaurants if there's, requirements on how far you have to be sitting from the next table and all those kinds of things.
All righty, Jeff, real quick for you.
Yeah, I just think it's going to look a lot like post-Katrina New Orleans in those initial months when we had sort of staggered businesses, limited hours at the bank, limited hours at the post office. I think we're going to see a lot of that, different businesses around town.
Yeah, good comparison. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us from your social distance locations. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week. One Form Sources. Thank you.